In early 2015, I was not doing well. I wasn't eating, I wasn't showering, I was barely moving. My cat was judging me. I was in denial, still managing to convince myself and those around me I was somewhat okay. I mean, they knew I was struggling, just not how much. I'd lived through waves of major depression for at least 15 years, but I'd never been this bad before. At the time, I lived alone, worked from home, and everyone knew I was under a lot of pressure from my business. The business is just a lot right now, I'd say. We've just got to close this investment and then I'll have more free time. It will be easier when we can afford to hire help. All of this was technically true, but even though I wouldn't admit it, even to myself, deep down I really just wanted out, and it was destroying me. At first it was exciting, the researching, the building, networking, promoting, the novelty of being a businesswoman and a girl boss, the self-importance and potential for riches. I co-founded it with a friend and brought in 2 other friends as well. We convinced people to invest. But at a certain point, things changed. I realised I was a terrible businesswoman, a sham of a girl boss. I cared little about our product and even less about our profit. I wanted out, but there was nothing I could do. I had backed myself into a corner. So much money, so many promises to so many people. I didn't want to let anyone down. But I was stuck and I didn't know how to free myself. I didn't think I could. Although I've written and spoken about my story before, I've never shared this part about the business, not publicly anyway. That's the brave bit. My family has a history of mental illness and intergenerational trauma, as do many or most of yours, I'm sure. My parents died prematurely in my early 20s, 2 years apart to the day, to the hour, on the 18th of Tishrei. They had no known mental health issues, and my sister is the sanest person in history. But a family tree has many branches. Starting at the root, my father's family, Russian in origin, lived happily in Egypt for several generations. In the 50s, facing persecution, they fled to Australia, bringing with them the deep scars of exile. At least one member of his family lives with bipolar disorder, though details are sketchy. My mother's side, all Polish, was almost entirely wiped out by 1945. My Zeta was the sole survivor from his side of the family. I don't know anything about his war experience because he never spoke about it, even to Mum. He never spoke much at all. My Nana, just a child when the war broke out, and her 2 older siblings survived. I know a lot about her war experiences, and sometimes I wish I didn't. Nana lived with bipolar disorder, which we believe predated the war, and we think her mother also struggled mentally. Nana spoke of her often as a very nervous woman. I was very close to Nana. She looked after us a lot as kids, and we looked after her after Mum and Dad died. There was an unspoken understanding between her and I, a tacit acknowledgement of our damaged souls. But I don't actually know a lot about her mental health. She was erratic and demanding in her final years, sometimes manic, often maudlin. By then she had early dementia and combined with the bipolar, it was hard to tell what was what. I know that throughout her life, beginning during the war, she had breakdowns, but I don't know what that means or what they looked like. At times growing up, Mum would say Nana had gone for a holiday, and I have to assume at least some of those times were actually spent in hospitals or rehab facilities. I wish I'd asked her about them. I wish I knew what sparked them, how they manifested, where she went, and how she got better. I wish I knew anything at all. Because maybe if I'd known more about her breakdowns, I would have seen mine coming. So in early 2015, I wasn't doing well. I was barely showering, rarely dressing. Leaving the house had become my worst nightmare, and I did so only for meetings or when my absence would set off alarms. On such occasions, it took every bit of my strength to act like a normal person who always showered and wore clothes and hadn't tried to feed her cat kidney beans so she wouldn't have to go out for cat food. All I did was work and sleep, neither well, both possibly nude. My memory of the time is patchy at best. I'd always imagined breakdowns as dramatic, chaotic, operatic. The word conjured images of screaming and fainting, head spinning, of straitjackets and stretchers, padded rooms and Rorschach tests. It turns out that couldn't be farther from the truth, at least in my case. There was no drama, no chaos, no head spinning. What I'd pictured as explosive and transcendent was in reality utterly mundane and profoundly human. A painfully slow unravelling with an unremarkable climax. To be clear, the business wasn't the only reason for my sluggish undoing, which, according to my psychiatrist, would probably have happened anyway. Other contributors included the end of a toxic long-term relationship, unresolved grief over my parents' deaths, being ghosted by 2 close friends, and the fact that my medication had quietly, clearly stopped working. But it was the business that had backed me into a corner prison, and thus it was the business that ultimately triggered my attempted escape. I'd had thoughts of suicide before. Not often, but there had been rough times when a little voice would present it as an option. Don't be stupid, I would always think, and not give it another thought. I had lost friends to it, and I never wanted to be that person. I never wanted to put my sister and her kids through that. My friend Charlotte took her life a year before I was trapped in my corner, not doing well. Charlotte was everything, larger than life, a beautiful, beloved celebrity. She was smart and funny and the most generous person I've ever met. If you said you liked her Chanel handbag, she'd give it to you. If you asked her to be in your student film, she'd show up early. An absolute mensch. Our friendship was based on fashion and mental illness, and her death hit me hard. A switch inside me quietly flipped. How could I make it if Charlotte couldn't? So one day, a year later, on a grassy knoll not far from here, one hot summer night, when the little voice presented me with an option, I no longer thought it was stupid. Far from it. I thought it was the best idea I'd ever had. This will fix everything, I thought, and I believed it. I'd read this about suicide, how the decision can feel like a revelation, how resistance becomes conviction and an almost giddy joy. I'd never seen her happier, people will say, of the dead, in the days and weeks before. They said it of Charlotte. So it was early 2015 and I sat down to kill myself. I had several bottles of pills and a note printed at Officeworks. What I didn't have was any idea if the pills would do the job or the will to Google it. So I just started taking them. Then my cat sauntered in. I'm not saying I stopped because of my cat, but I'm not saying it. Her ridiculous little head triggered in me a basic and extremely tenuous will to live. It wasn't revelatory or inspiring. It wasn't operatic or even cinematic. And the universe didn't send me a sign. I just saw a cat. So I didn't do it. But that didn't make me better. It was, in fact, much worse. I was broken and unconvinced I'd made the right choice, as I would remain for some time. But I drove to my sister's and I told her everything. Actually, I have no idea what I said. But I think the gist was a plea for help. She's here tonight if you need clarification. Many people don't live to tell their story. Charlotte didn't, Nana didn't, but I did. I wrote a book about it and what led me to that precipice, minus the business, and the year of recovery that followed. It's about family and friendship, about mental illness and Holocaust trauma, about the combined healing powers of mango smoothies and the ocean, and about my cat. I'm also told it's funny. But I don't want to leave you tonight with the impression that my story is extraordinary or complete, for it is neither. It's more common than you think, and it could very well repeat itself. I get messages from readers all the time, from all over the world. People who've been where I was, who see themselves in me, who thought it was just them. And hearing from others who've been there makes my soul and bearing my soul and my scars worth it. My story is universal. It is ongoing. It is utterly mundane and profoundly human. Thank you.